On this episode of the Innovative Schools podcast, we're talking to Megan Diede and Kara Rigsby from Integrated about transforming education through integrated teaching. Come on, let's learn together. Hey everybody, welcome to the Innovative Schools podcast. I'm Jordan, your host for this episode, and today we are talking with Megan Diede and Kara Rigsby from Integrated. Hi, welcome to the podcast.
Hey,
hello.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you. Yes.
I'm really excited about this. I was looking over all the things about, integrated teaching and your pathways to learning and all that stuff. I'm really interested about that whole topic. But before we get into those specifics, can each of you say a little bit about kind of what you've done in education and what you're doing now, kind of how you got to those places?
Yeah, definitely. Education, we've both been teaching for 15 years, and we're currently in third grade, teaching away. Mm-hmm. And it kind of started by happenstance, honestly, how Integrated kind of was born and how it got started. It was January 54th.
That is not a date.
It's a teacher's joke. It's the longest month of the year.
It's like the Monday.
I guess I just showed my cards a little bit.
Yeah. Everybody else was still laughing. And it was that time that I was teaching that I needed something different to happen. I needed somebody to talk to, someone to just kind of converse with in education. And I happened to ask Kara if she would like to start running. Running, I don't know. It seemed like something that you would want to do.
Like outside running.
Yes, like run.
And you're from Wyoming.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes, so we actually run inside.
Okay.
It's much better
I'm
there.
glad.
Through of all of that together, we started talking about education and our classrooms and how things were becoming frustrating and we wanted more and what could we do. And really what came about that is just how can we instruct students a little bit differently.
Mm-hmm. And it was at that time we, in our careers, we were in years 5 or 6 at that time. And it was the point where we knew something had to be different because if something wasn't going to change, we were going to leave. And we didn't really feel that leaving was, the right decision to make. So instead we're like, okay, well, how can we make it better? Not just for us as educators, but we're struggling because our students were struggling. Yeah. So how can we make it better for our students? But also as educators, we're like, we don't want another thing. We don't want another thing to be put on our
there's so much that you
there's
already have to be
so many
boxes to check.
So many plates to hold.
Yeah, we're already spinning so many plates. So we were thinking just how can we think about what we're doing maybe a little bit differently, but yet drastically change students' educational experience.
Yeah, I love that, especially as a dad of a second grader, like to hear teachers that kind of got to this place where you're like, this is tough and challenging, but instead of fleeing and running, you guys went head on into it and said, well, how can we change this to really help our students?
Right. And we wanted it to be better in our classrooms for ourselves.
Yeah.
And in turn, make it better for them. Mm-hmm. And so together, we kind of just developed this new way of thinking in our classroom.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's great. And that's basically what we're going to be talking about is that kind of new way of thinking. So integrated in the 50-foot view.
Yes.
What do you guys do?
It's a good question.
That is a good question.
We teach.
Yeah.
Integrated has become something more than just integrating content together. It's become integrating socially. It's become integrating different pieces of your lives together. It's teamwork. It's instructing your kids in a different way. It's just we help educators find a way to help their students grow with differentiation, student engagement, and it's all while doing this, making it easier for our students to learn and for us to teach. Mm-hmm. So we've come up with an integrated framework, that kind of helps guide teachers on how to put all of that together using the resources that they already have, as well as how to instruct our students differently so that they can learn those skills that they need to keep going.
Yeah. So what was some of the challenges, kind of in a specific sense, what were some of the challenges and things that you saw in your students, or maybe not challenges, but I guess, I don't know how to phrase this quite correctly, but I imagine there was either a specific scenario or generally what you were seeing in your students of maybe they weren't meeting test scores or they, struggles. Like, what was it that you saw specifically that made you say, hey, there's got to be a different way for us to do this?
Yeah, absolutely.
I remember I was a first grade teacher at the time, and I had brought all my kids to the front, and we were going to be going through an ELA lesson. And I had prepped, I had all the resources, I had done all of the things, and they came to the front, we were ready to get started, and I look out at their faces, and I just remember thinking, I have 2 kids that are truly like with me right now. I have 3 in the back that are completely, they're not necessarily being behaviors, but they're not mentally engaged with what we're talking about right now. I have 4 more off to the side who are struggling, before we even start. And so I just kept sitting there thinking that with all of the training and the resources, my students were plateauing in their test scores and they were not engaged. Even after everything that I had been given and told to do, I was realizing that there has to be something different, or there has to be something more that we could do to help with the student engagement and therefore help with the student growth. Because as a first grade teacher, I'm thinking we have to be able to engage these students in a better way. There has to be a better way. There has to be a way that I can think differently about how I'm presenting my instruction for this to become truly a classroom environment rather than you feel like you're walking through a museum and everything is super quiet. So that was the moment, and that's when we started having those discussions with Megan in upper grade, just with, because she was seeing similar things in her classroom as well. The lack of engagement, the lack of student growth, and us finally deciding like something's got to change. And it was that really kind of started us off.
Yeah, and what it comes down to is we were doing all the things, right? We had so many things that we were thinking we were right. We were doing all the educators' things, and we kept thinking like something isn't working. Then you put it back on yourself as a teacher. Yeah. Like, what am I doing incorrectly?
Is that something that kind of hit you, feeling like it was something with you?
Yes.
Because you get taught all the different things in school or even coming to conferences or whatever.
Absolutely. So, you're a lifelong learner in education, right? And I think educators are the most amazing people. We can pick each other out on the street and be like, oh, she's a teacher. Oh, he's a teacher. There's just something different about us. And we love so hard and we want to do such a good job for our kids. And so when it's not working and we don't know why or how to fix it, you start reflecting on yourself, like these babies, they have to learn this. I want them to love school. I want them to come back and be smiling. And so it just hit us very hard that how do we move forward with that?
Yeah, I can really tell that both of you care real deeply about your students.
Yes.
And you guys you're still teaching. You're not just like off consulting and talking to people, but you guys are still in the classroom.
We're still practicing educators. We work 180 days with those babies, and and we do this, if you will, on the side, just to help other educators.
Yeah, and I think you really hit it when you said that you're lifelong learners, and you can see and how you guys want to bring that cycle back to teachers. You're teaching all the way through. When it comes to I guess one of the questions that I think of when it comes to like the way integrated works and your pathways to learning, it's not just for one type, like it's not just for the difficult, right?
Right.
It's not just for the easy or, the ones that have, that may have ADD or ADHD. Like,
sure.
It's for everyone.
It's for everybody.
Yeah.
And one thing we speak on as well is it can be any age, any grade, any subject or content area. Because you think about the students entering any of those classrooms across the nation. Every one of those students is going to learn in a little bit different way. And so with the pathways that we are training and speaking on, is we're giving all of those students an opportunity to be successful in whatever content area, whatever age level they're at. We're trying to give them an opportunity to be successful in learning and understanding what's being presented to them.
Yeah. And that's what's great when I was looking over everything that you guys do, is that it's not just for one content area or for one thing. It's really it's a philosophy of kind of like of teaching. Can you speak just a little bit about, we keep saying this word integrated and everything. What does that mean?
So integrated is putting together different content standards for them to make sense. So you're talking about leading with a content from maybe science, social studies, civics, right? We have to provide our students with knowledge, because that's where it's at, is if you have background knowledge of something, you're able to understand the skills or vocabulary or things that come along with that. So integrated is basically putting together your different subjects and teaching them in a way that's going to help our students put into their long-term memory. Because at the end of the day, we want our students to have all of this knowledge. We want them to be very much prepared for whatever future they hold and whatever job they want to take. And the pathways that we keep talking about are pathways to understand that content very well. So we're talking about movement and music and visual arts and storytelling. You know, these different ways. We're all sitting here, even as adults, we learn in a very different way from each other. And so when we present this to our teachers, that's kind of how we present it, is we're giving you multiple ways to understand the information, just like our students.
Yeah, I definitely see that even in myself in learning and having all the different pathways to understand something. I think, we live in a really interesting time that we have access to all these different pathways of learning. I tell people all the time, like, I feel like I learn more outside of school, but and I think that's because I can look at all these different pathways, and I think when I was in school, having something that was more of what you guys are talking about, is integrating all these things together, I probably could have been more successful and felt more like I knew what was going on. It was kind of tough for me. But so we've kind of defined a little bit of integrated, what you do. We mentioned the pathways, but what we're going to do is we're going to take just a quick short break. And when we come back, we'll talk more about those pathways of learning and some of those specifics that our listeners can kind of maybe start working into their curriculum, into their lessons. So listeners, hang tight for just a little bit, and we'll see you on the other side of the break. Responsibility-centered discipline empowers students to own their behavior and academic success, creating a positive school culture. Responsibility-centered discipline challenges old classroom management, reward and punishment programs, and consequences that rarely result in sustainable behavioral change. Schools across the country that have implemented RCD have seen fewer referrals, fewer suspensions, and a better school climate overall. Ready to make a real change? Visit GiveEm5, that's GIVEMFIVE.com, to learn how to transform your school or district with responsibility-centered discipline.
Join us at the Innovative School Summit, the nation's top K-12 education conference. Connect with internationally recognized thought leaders, educators, and consultants as we dive into game-changing teaching strategies and research-based methods. Each summit features multiple conferences, all in one location, covering topics like at-risk students, innovative teaching strategies, school discipline, and more. Create your own learning experience by choosing sessions from any of the conferences. With events in cities like New York, Orlando, Las Vegas, Nashville, and San Antonio, there's always a summit near you. There are 2 upcoming summits, and we want you there. One in Las Vegas from July 7th through 11th, and one in Nashville from July 14th through 18th. Go to innovativeschoolsummit.com to register. We'll see you there.
Are you facing challenges at work, in your personal life, or with your relationships? The Self-Regulation Skill Set for Educators by Brad Chapin is a powerful resource designed to help you overcome obstacles and build resilience. Whether you're navigating classroom stress, balancing family life or even dealing with situations in any part of your life, this book provides practical tools and strategies that can help you manage stress, improve emotional regulation, and find a path forward. The skills outlined in this book have already helped countless educators and individuals reduce stress and boost their ability to handle life's challenges. Ready to make a change? Visit youthlight.com and get your copy of the Self-Regulation Skill Set for Educators today.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Innovative Schools podcast. We're here with Megan and Kara from Integrated. We've talked a little bit about Integrated and your pathways to learning. You mentioned them really quickly. Yes. But let's take some time and dive into some of them. But first is, can you go over them again and maybe say a little bit about each one of those pathways to learning?
Yeah, we've identified 7 pathways for students to get that content in a way that makes sense to them. So those 7 are movement, music, storytelling, visual arts, hands-on, technology,
and auditory.
I liked the throw at the end.
Yeah, I was like,
it took a minute. You're still using the pathways of learning to learn your pathways of learning.
Yeah. Sometimes I'm like, what? And if you say them out of order, then you're all messed up.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
I totally get that and understand that. How did you said you've identified 7.
Yes.
How did you end up with these 7?
It kind of stemmed from when Kara and I started teaching, but then I got my master's in integrating arts and technology. And through that work, I realized that a lot of the things that I was learning is really what our students need in the classroom, just at a different level. And so thinking about how I was learning as a learner through my master's degree, I realized I need some of these pathways to understand what's happening.
Oh, okay, yeah.
So with that, I started talking to Kara about, hey, listen, our kids we're doing these things already in our classroom, but I think it's called something. And so that's really where the pathways of learning was born, is we were already kind of integrating those into our teaching, and we realized that they're really purposeful for our kids.
It really came down to as well kind of that field investigation almost, or field research, where
I love that.
We would go through a lesson or instruction and we'd be like, all right, what did we do here, and how were kids accessing that information today, and what was making that successful? And so that's also, stemming from what Meg had brought from her master's, but then taking it a step further and then truly identifying what was happening in the classroom and getting real-time information about, okay, this is, today we used technology, and I might add purposeful technology. The kids were accessing information in that way, or they were creation in that way. And so a little bit of research and a little bit of field study on our part as well. But that's how the pathways came to be.
Yeah, I love that it's not just like this theoretical thing. You're like, this sounds like a good idea, but it's, again, because it goes back to you guys still being teachers.
Right.
I think that's I'm going to keep stressing that because I think that's really important.
It's huge.
That it's not just something that you like came up with and you're like, this sounds good and I'm going to start talking about it. You thought about it and you said, well, let's actually try this and see what kind of results that we get.
Anything that we speak on, consult on, coach on, we have implemented, used, and developed in our own classrooms and in our own time. So everything that we're speaking on, we truly believe in because we have been able to see in real time the effects and the power that it has with students and their student growth.
And I think part of it is that we've had those trip ups and those mistakes that haven't worked in our classroom. And so we're able to take those out of the equation for other educators. And we can give them, all right, actually try it like this. When we struggle with something, this is the steps we took to get there. Let me give you kind of a guide to help you so you don't have to feel that struggle like we did.
Yeah, that's great. So going back to the 7, we have technology, auditory, music. This is a different order from what you said, so it's probably throwing you off. Technology, auditory, music, movement, visual arts, storytelling, and a hands-on.
Yes.
Okay, I want to dive into a couple of these and let's talk about them a little bit. Okay. So visual arts. What is that pathway to learning? How can a teacher actually integrate that into their lesson.
Yes.
Did I do that correctly?
Yes, you did. Good plug-in.
That was awesome.
I'm going to take this one because visual arts is my pathway.
You did
It
do a
is.
master's.
I
in it.
love visual arts. In fact, the construction paper, the glue, the glitter.
Oh, there's
That doesn't sound like master's level.
there are times where I have to go next door and say, put down the glitter. Our poor custodial staff.
Oh, goodness.
I don't know how many times she's had to leave like treats and candy bars and
all you need.
Little notes saying thank you so much because
Do you leave a sign that's made in construction paper but with glitter that says sorry for the glitter?
No, but I'm going to now.
Okay, good.
Genius. That is genius. With a cupcake and a little can of pop,
Perfect.
I try to clean up the mess.
Perfect.
Okay, but the real thing is that visual arts can play such a huge part in students' lives. In that, one of the students that I had a couple years ago, he was brilliant, absolutely brilliant. He couldn't communicate with his peers because he couldn't articulate what he was trying to say at a level that they understood.
Okay.
And so he would go through all of the motions and get all of the things, but then become so frustrated when he couldn't explain it. So that's where the visual arts came in for him, is we were inside of a huge unit with animal traits and all the things, and he decided that he was going to show his learning through a visual arts. He was going to create these animal traits using all kinds of different materials. And then when he presented that to his class, they were like, I get it. I understand. So not only for himself did he understand what he was learning, but then he provided an experience and a way for them to understand what he was trying to tell them. And so there was a double learning happening there.
Got it.
And so with visual arts, you're thinking any way that students can be creative, use different art things, painting. We have our kids paper mache. We had 75 third graders paper macheing in the lunchroom.
Sorry, custodians.
Yeah, sorry, custodians. We did stay late and clean up the floor.
We did.
But that type of experience for them, they were creating globes. They had to have an understanding of continents in order for us to have an understanding of weather and where climate happens that leads to ecosystems. And that one experience, that one visual arts piece, gave them something to hold on to that was concrete, and everything is starting to connect to it.
Gotcha. So it was more like maybe it's both ways, showing what they've learned through what they've made.
Yep.
But also, does it go the other way of like you using something to visually show them?
Absolutely.
I guess at the beginning.
Yeah, it not only can it be a end of unit where like they showcase their learning, but it can also be used as a building block throughout their learning. So for example, the globes, we did that at a very early stage in their learning of what was happening. But after that creation, we were able to use those visual representations as we continue to build upon their learning.
Gotcha.
So when you're talking about different ecosystems, weather, climate, natural disasters, all of those things, the weather that they experience in, let's say, Australia, that's going to be very different than what we experience in Wyoming. So they're able to see visually like why that might be different and all of the learning that goes with that.
Yeah, I can really see that. I always had a problem in school where I could, on a test, I could tell you what was on the page in the textbook and where it was and how the letters were arranged, but I couldn't always draw the information back out.
Yeah.
And so I could see where, for me, doing something like that, if I'm putting on the strips of paper and drawing the continents and doing all this different stuff, it would help me visualize and start associating in a space.
Absolutely.
Rather than just on a page the information and the knowledge that
it's less sit and get, and it's more hands-on, involved in your own learning. Yeah. Absolutely.
And it's truly, we're trying to create an experience where you're taking a more abstract concept and you're trying to make it concrete. And that's what the learning pathways are trying to do for these students. They're just trying to create a bridge from the content transferred into knowledge. They're trying to create that bridge so students can be successful.
Yeah, and it also gives them a chance to, I guess if you're using it at the end, to show how they can retrieve and organize and display what they've learned.
Yeah, and it comes down to, that's a huge piece, is the assessment piece. There's a lot of pieces of assessment that we don't have control over, whether it's from state or district, but the one piece we do have control over for assessment is what are our students walking away with? What do they actually know? And so that's where, when we say in our sessions, assessment can be fun.
Yeah.
We get eye rolls and humps and they're not, arms crossed. But really what it comes down to is it's allowing students sometimes to showcase their knowledge in a different way. So it's not just a multiple choice.
Yeah.
It's not a short answer. And you can truly see your student. You can figure out what they're really good at. You can figure out what gaps they have. And then you can start closing those. And that's where the student growth comes into play.
Yeah, for sure. So let's talk about storytelling then. That's another pathway that you guys have identified. So how do you guys use storytelling?
How do we do that? Yeah.
Storytelling is a great way for students to connect with one another. So storytelling can honestly be almost a climate and culture building piece as well. But when we're talking about storytelling, we're not simply talking about, helping students build fictional stories, where that's where it starts. But when it's being used in a learning pathway and you're trying to strengthen their knowledge in a content area, you are actually backing the content into that story. So for example, our students were learning about forces in motion. Their job was to create a story about going to an amusement park with roller coasters. But it wasn't just left at that. They had to demonstrate understanding by putting vocabulary terms in their writing. Their characters could be, doing different things, but they had to demonstrate understanding with vocabulary, with their illustrations, whether it was, more of a chapter book layout or whether it was a comic strip layout. We gave them kind of student choice in that. But the storytelling piece was just giving them a different way to showcase their understanding of that content before we kept moving on, because we wanted to make sure that, everything was solid before throwing new skills or new content at them.
Right, sure, yeah. So you have this list of words that you're supposed to know and maybe spell and, whatever.
Sure, yeah.
And I guess every time I do one of these and I'm like, man, yeah, I remember that in school. And I could just pull those words out, but I didn't always know how to use them.
Yes.
I didn't always know the right way. I'm like, I know how to spell that word mostly, but I don't know how to use it in a sentence.
We talk a lot about how kids, they can memorize.
Yeah.
But that's not our goal for students in our educational system. We don't want to create a group of students who are just simply good at taking a test. We want students who truly understand the material that we're trying to present to them. And I was one of those kids. I was a great memorizer, like you were saying. I could spell like a banshee. I could memorize multiple choice. But the second I took the test or that section of the learning was done, that all went away. And if someone were to truly ask me to do something like putting it in a story, that's a whole nother ballgame, because I truly didn't understand what it actually was. But giving them a pathway, if I would have been given a different pathway, it would have forced me at least to think about it in a different way to then hopefully better understand.
Sure.
And then when it comes down to is you forget everything that you learned. If you have to memorize and you're like, okay, I'm just going to quick do this, you're not going to have that information anymore. Steve Spangler says something very memorable for us, and he says that activities are transactional and experiences are transformational.
Oh, wow, yeah.
And when we heard him say that, we were like, that is everything. Because if we just keep continuing to go through transactions in school, you forget those and they go away. It's quick and over and done.
Yeah, I very much relate to that.
But if you're transforming your education, if you're transforming the lesson and the learning, you're taking that with you, and now you have all of this knowledge that's with you forever, for as long as you want it.
Yeah. So how do you build? So one of the last kind of pathway we'll talk about is hands-on. So how do you build the experiences with hands-on?
With the hands-on. It's a lot like visual arts. You can bring the art piece. I think they go hand in hand. But the hands-on piece is very important because students, we need to touch some of the things that we're doing. We need to be actively involved in our learning. And so when you have students that need to have that tactile piece or to be moving, thinking about fractions or time, that is a very hard concept to grasp if you're just telling me about it. But if you can get hands-on and you're building the timeline or you're building the clock or you're measuring this, it's just something that students can use and move and manipulate.
Mm-hmm. It's when you're thinking about sensory, it's just hitting a different sense of the students. And like she was saying, some students learn really well just by listening. A lot of students, me included, I need to be able to touch it, to feel it, to experience it in some way for me to truly understand what they mean by that. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And again, it's taking something from abstract to concrete, and hands-on is a great way to have students experience that.
Another piece with that is a lot of the examples that we share are very elementary. It's very primary and intermediate, but we cannot speak enough to middle school, high school, college that us adults, we need to understand how learning works, and we need different pathways. So our high schoolers and our junior high, they're just kindergartners and giant bodies. Mm-hmm. We still need to bring out the Play-Doh or the something to investigate or something to do, to create that experience. I think so many times I have a high schooler of my own that will come home and I'm like, how's school? How is it going? It's fine, great, whatever, But there was a time in his schooling that he came running into the house. Mom, you have to sign this piece of paper. And I'm thinking, okay, like we're field trip. What does he want to do? They were going to explode pumpkins in science class. And I was like, yes.
Absolutely.
And he's like, I know how to use a fire extinguisher. So I'm going to be
hands-on.
Talk about hands-on.
Exactly.
But now we have,
safely.
Hopefully. Hands-on. He still has all of his fingers.
Oh, good.
But thinking about that experience, that hands-on, using it, he can now tell me chemical reactions. And he's going to take that with him for a very long time. Mm-hmm. Rather than just reading about how those things happen in a book, in a textbook, he was able to participate in that learning, and now he can hold on to that in his own way.
Yeah. And sorry, were you going to say something?
Oh, I was just going to add the piece of that's why learning pathways and experiences are so powerful, is that it can hit any age, any grade, any content area, because it doesn't have to be, elementary specific. Like Meg said, every kid is going to learn differently, even in a higher setting. And so we just need to give them, and they deserve the opportunity to learn in those ways, just like our younger kids do.
Yeah, for sure. Do these experiences have to be elaborate? Does hands-on have to be huge?
That's a great question.
That's a wonderful question.
No.
I loved this sinking.
No.
In stereo.
In fact, no, because we just don't have time to make them elaborate all the time.
We talked earlier about all the spinning plates.
Oh, all the plates that we carry. I think what happens is that when you do plan these in, the students are grasping the information quickly. And you don't have to spend so much time on it. So there's that piece. But on the other side is they can be very, very simple. Mm-hmm. If you don't want to create this giant, elaborate experience, just do something little. We're talking about cultural studies, and you just bring in dot painting, and connecting some of that cultural piece to it. And you just have this one little piece. Or thinking about storytelling, you just have your students tell that story of their writing to some peers. They have now said it to somebody 3 or 4 different times. They can add more detail. They can think about what else they want to do with that story. It can be very simple, integrated ways for you to elevate your instruction.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I kind of knew the answer to that question.
Yeah, I'm glad you asked.
I wanted to put it out there. I think about it, just as you've been talking, specifically with the hands-on, like, sure, you can go elaborate. My daughter right now is learning how to measure things. And so, she loves just walking around with a ruler.
Absolutely.
Like, that's hands-on. She's just like, how wide is this? How long is that? And she's just around doing it. And we just put a ruler in her hands. We didn't make some elaborate game or something for her to go to measure and find the code words. I mean, you can do that for sure.
You could.
Like, if you have the time, good for you, but
sometimes simple can be better.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I love that you've done that. That's
perfect. So I have one more question. I really like this question. One of our producers wrote it in just as we were going. How do you respond to people that say that students don't need experiences?
Oh. They haven't been teaching long enough.
They may say, I don't have time. I don't.
Oh, absolutely. We get that all the time. I don't have time.
Or even just talking about, we talked a minute about like high schoolers. They're high schoolers. They're grown-ups.
They can do it. They're old. They should just do it.
The definition of experience is gaining knowledge through participation and observation. The definition of experience has the word knowledge in it. So my question would be to them is, why aren't you using them? If our job as educators is to build their knowledge and to build student growth, why are experiences not a part of our instruction on a daily basis?
Yeah.
Mic drop.
Yeah, for real. I mean, yes, I completely agree.
We need we have to give our students the knowledge. So many times we hear, well, our students aren't growing, the tests aren't making it, our national averages are dropping in reading and writing and math. What are we doing? Well, we're not providing them knowledge. You can teach them all the skills that you want, but if they don't know how to apply those skills, then they're useless.
Well, and what's happening is we tend to throw a lot at these students, and we're not creating a bridge in order to take all of what we're trying to tell them and turn it into long-term memory. So that is why the pathways and experiences are so important, is because that is the bridge in order for them to turn it into long-term memory and therefore show growth on all of those things that they're worrying about.
Yeah. Well, Kara, Megan, thank you so much
Welcome.
for joining us on the Innovative Schools podcast. I learned a lot. I'm even thinking of, we have this podcast, but how do we bring some of these pathways into the podcast?
Yes,
so
we can help
our
you with
listeners
that.
can listen and learn and keep going. So thank you so much for joining us on this. You guys, two things.
Okay.
Is one, by the time this podcast is released, I think you'll have a book out.
We will have a book out. Yes, it's on pre-order right now, but it will be in the hands of educators on April 30th. 2025.
That's fantastic. So if we release this early, when the release date is. If it's after April 30, then you can go and get it. Do you have the website or do we know yet? We can put a link
Yep.
in the show notes.
So there will be on our website is integratedk12.com. So you can head on over there and get yourself your own copy of that. This book, it's called The Elevated Educator. And it has got 70 plus ideas for educators to use to create pathways and experiences in their classroom, as well as kind of the application behind that. So it's just the book. It's the guide.
Wow, that's wonderful. And also through that website, can they contact you if they have either questions or talk to you about possibly coming in?
Absolutely. Yep. We're on all social media platforms at Integrated K-12, Integrated EDU, as well as you can email us. You can get that information on our website. We come into schools, districts, conferences. We help consult and coach schools literally all over the nation. So
perfect. We will put links to all of that in the show notes.
Wonderful.
But thank you again for joining us on this episode.
Yeah, thank you for having us.
And good luck. And teach everyone. Just go.
Everyone. Thank you so much. We appreciate it.
If you enjoyed this episode of the Innovative Schools podcast, I want to ask you to do us a favor and share this with everyone you know, and rate it, review it, all of those different things. We're not really doing this to make ourselves important. We want to make you educators important, and we want to give you as many tools and resources as possible, and we want to reach as many educators as we possibly can. Teaching is a very difficult career choice, and it has a lot of late nights and hard work, and that is all rewarded in the success of your students. Thank you for joining us on this episode. I'm Jordan. I will see you on the next one.